continuing on with the first season of The Mandalorian, we now come to the final episode, Redemption. Now, I said in the last episode that it took a while to get to where it was going, but once it did, it was a really good episode. Now, I did feel this way about this episode, however, the first half, while it took a while to get going, had enough to keep me interested. So, what happens? Gideon is holding Mando, Greef, Karga, and Cara Dune hostage, but Mando finds out there's a way into the sewage where the Mandalorian cult is stationed. Unfortunately, in the process of creating a distraction to allow them to get into the area, Mando gets injured, but is repaired by IG-11. When they find the base of the Mandalorian cult, they find out that the Empire has attacked them and has killed the majority of who was there. The Forager then tells Mando he must continue on and find out where the child comes from, and return it to its own kind. They escape through the sewage pipes to where the Empire has set a trap. IG-11 then sacrifices himself in order to allow everyone to escape. After a brief fight with Moff Gideon, Mando heads off into his ship to find out where the child has come from. So as I said at the start, it took a while to get going, but once it did, I loved the hell out of this episode. And in the first section, I really didn't even find it that boring. The scout troopers being messed with by the child and then being hit on the head as a punishment was actually quite funny, and it got a laugh out of me. As well as the big gunfight that started between IG-11 on the speeder shooting the stormtroopers and killing them as he went past, it then turned into a massive fight in the centre of this town, which looked really cool. I also liked that they have made a new incinerator trooper cannon, and in this episode, which is something I really thought was cool because I love the design of the incinerator trooper. I loved it from Force Unleashed and I love it here. We also get the full backstory of Mando in this episode after Moff Gideon talks about Mando and Cara's past, whereas before we just got little details. We learned that Mando's homeworld was attacked by the CIS and his parents had hid him, which then followed him to be rescued by Death Watch. I assume this episode took place sometime before the Clone Wars, but if it took place during the Clone Wars, what I would have liked instead is that have the Republic attack Mando's homeworld instead of the CIS. This would mean that then the Republic that then turned into the Empire during Order 66. There is then a heartfelt reason why Mando hates the Empire so much, rather than just being cult hatred. On topic of the Mandalorians, we see in this episode that they got exterminated by the Empire, and when Mando asked the Forager if they escaped, she said, "I hope so." I think that some of them did escape and did survive, and I think they will make a base on another planet, which Mando will use as a safe haven when he's being attacked by the Empire in next season, or maybe in the season afterwards. I also like the Forager talking to Mando about what he needs to do next. She tells him that he is this child's father, until he can return to him on his home planet. This I really like because it shows the Forager acting like an old mentor to someone who is like a classic Mandalorian, and it sends a mother to all of the others. Someone else I really liked in this episode was IG-11. I don't even think I have so far seen a droid with such human emotions as this droid. I'm not sure quite whether it's 100% like this or not, but I thought it was cool. And when he said that he was going to self-destruct in order to save everybody, I thought the dialogue between him and Mando was really, really well done. I also like the Moff Gideon for some reason has a dark saber, as last time we saw it was being used to lead Mandalore, or in Star Wars Rebels I think it is. I'm interested to learn where and how Moff Gideon found it and became in possession of it. Also on another note, I would have liked it if Moff Gideon flew something a bit more interesting rather than a TIE fighter, and yes it was cool the way it landed, it had his wings sort of folding in, but in the grand scheme of things it was just another TIE fighter. I would have loved it if they was flying something like a TIE Defender or a TIE Striker or even a TIE Advanced fighter that Darth Vader uses. In this episode there were a couple of things I picked up on that I really didn't like. The first was the scout troopers not being able to hit anything, mainly the tin can that they were trying to shoot, they just couldn't hit it. Now, this was trying to be funny, but by saying stormtroopers can't hit anything, but I wish they didn't deliberately make reference to this. As far as I'm concerned, the Death Star was when this all started with the stormtroopers purposely missing in order to allow Luke, Han and Leia to escape. Now this was officially confirmed by Lucasfilm a while ago that it was doing it to, as cause of a distraction to try and allow them to escape because there's a tracker on the bottom of the Millennium Falcon in episode 4. And anything that retcons this I just find really annoying. Another thing I didn't like is Mando's helmet being removed and seeing his face. I said before that I don't like this because Mando, to me, feels like a Master Chief kind of character, where he walks around without saying too much, and all he's got to convey with his motions is through his voice and his body language. But by removing his helmet, you remove that mystery of him, and that you add that identity, and I would have liked it if they just like, kept it on, or even if you have to remove it. And what I would have liked instead is that you remove Mando's helmet, but as soon as you see the bottom of his head, it then cuts away. So overall, I did enjoy this episode, despite this episode, like, getting a while to get going. And with that, we've now come to the end of the first season of The Mandalorian. Now, I'm not going to go into, like, a full season review necessarily, because I've done that already. However, after finishing this episode and writing this script, I went back to watch my review and see if my opinion on it had changed at all. The answer to that question is a little. I still don't really like this series necessarily. I don't really see it as being one of the best Star Wars TV shows I've ever seen. However, it's certainly not the worst. I do just think they added the child in to get the show off its feet, because I just on its own, the season hasn't really got a lot going for it. Yes, Mando is an interesting character and learning about his backstory is cool, but after the first couple of episodes where Mando is on the run with a child, there really isn't much you can do in the way of story, especially with a bounty hunter type story, and that is my biggest issue with this season. However, as we know, Season 2 of The Mandalorian is in development, so let's see what happens with Mando trying to get the child back to his home planet.